How beautiful that music, amen? Absolutely beautiful. And Christ's body, of course, is beautiful. Last night, how many of you were here? Just raise your hands. Amen, look at that. Good number of people came out last night to hear Andrew's message about the Red Sea crossing. And we have more coming up here. I want to make a correction last night. Somebody asked the question, how wide was that underground or underwater road that they crossed over there at the Noebi site? And I said it was 6 to 8 miles, but I was wrong. It's across the Gulf. It was 8 miles. The width of the trail there might have been a mile to 2 miles. Look at this picture on the screen, and you can see on either side of the path that the children of Israel walked on were steep, steep canyons, like our Snake River Canyon. There would be no way they could go underneath those areas and bring their wagons up. I think there's another picture as well, and you can see those. You can see how the Lord intended and planned for that ahead of time. And see, we'll get the next picture up here just in a minute. There we go. And you can see from this description, this artistic description of what it would have looked like on either side of that path that the Israelites crossed over on. God planned ahead, amen? Perhaps as he drained the earth after the flood. He said, they're going to need a bridge across this gulf here when they escape from Egypt. And so God plans ahead for your life and for my life. Andrew, this morning we are looking forward to your telling us about Noah's Ark, where God destroyed the earth with water. And they have evidently found that site. And what a testimony to a God in a culture where they do not believe that the world was destroyed by a flood, because that holds them then accountable. May we be accountable to him as you speak this morning. Thank you.
Can you guys hear me? Hello. Happy Sabbath, everyone. Okay, I guess everyone hears me now. The guy up there is telling me to speak more and more. He's testing my mic. Yeah, I'm glad to be back here in this area. I think I was last here for the eclipse. Christine and I and some friends, we went up to where it was totally dark. So that was fun. And then 2 years ago, in 2016, she had me here to give you an update on what we're doing overseas in the Middle East. And since that time, a lot has happened, actually. And so that's why she was talking to me and wondering when I could come through the area. And so last year, I think I was home for only 2 months out of the year. And so we've been traveling through the Middle East and also doing television programs and interviews across the United States. So I'm happy to share with you guys some of the stuff this morning about Noah's Ark. So I have a lot of slides. We'll see if we can get through it before everyone tells me they're hungry for potluck. So I'm going to go through, hopefully not too fast, but just a little background. I know it seems like a lot of you guys were here last night, so I'm just going to go through this really quick. I first went overseas in 1997. I was in college, and a friend of mine wanted to go to this boat-shaped formation that had been found in eastern Turkey, and he invited me along, just the two of us. And that was my first trip to the country of Turkey and the Middle East. And then I've been back multiple times, and here's just a photo showing our very first trip there, and then our trip this last November. Most of the same people there. In 2000, we met with a Turkish geologist, a professor from the Ataturk University, and he was interested in this site. He believes it's actually Noah's Ark too. And so on that trip, we were there twice at the boat-shaped formation. And since that time, we've been back doing filming for different documentary films, just gathering evidence. But then in 2014, a friend of mine from New Zealand was able to get a permit to scan the site, and we'll talk about those scans later. But that was the first time that the site had been investigated since the early 1990s and the 1980s. And so we have some new exciting results that just came in about a month or two ago, late last year, that we'll share this morning. Now, we're looking at the region of eastern Turkey, so I'm going to go through these like cultural photos really fast so you can kind of see what it's like to be there. This is mainly a predominantly Kurdish area, and the Kurds love us, the Turks love us too. The politics you hear in the news, on the ground, it's different. So they like us, especially since we're helping them fight ISIS in Iraq and Syria. So if that ever changes, I don't know what it'll be like, but for now they like us. Just some photographs of the kids there. They're always asking for money when you meet these kids. And it's a mainly agricultural society out there. There's some manufacturing, but you see them with farming and raising sheep and goats. And they take over the road, so you'll have to stop. And this sheep went right up to my friend's camera, and he took a really great photograph of this. Now, it's a really fertile area. We believe Noah, landed in this region, and after the flood, it wasn't a desert. They were able to grow a lot of stuff. So that purple cabbage you see on the right side, that's the cabbage, green and purple, that you see in America. And so the green on the left side, they're gigantic, like basketball or actually larger. And so I think I brought some seeds once and gave it to, I don't know, did I give that to you, Christina? But I guess she didn't bring any giant cabbage rolls to potluck yet. I don't know if they grow here. But again, it's a really friendly area. Now, when you're out there doing stuff, if the locals see you, they'll come and give you chai tea, Turkish tea. And these guys, we were at a fossil site near the boat-shaped formation, and these guys saw us out there, and they just brought tea out to us and served us. And so it was really a surprise. Now, here's just a short little video clip kind of giving you an idea what it's like over there. Most of those scenes were shot in the spring. You see how green it is out there. By fall, it's kind of like California. Everything's brown. Now, the topic of Noah's Ark is of interest even to the general public. As we know, Hollywood has made movies about it. Sadly, they're always inaccurate compared to the Bible. So this last movie that came out, they had rock monsters attacking the ark. They were defending the ark from the wicked people. And so strange. In Europe, there's this big boat in Netherlands that this guy built, almost the size of Noah's Ark. What was kind of, I don't know if it's sad or ironic, but this boat actually had the people and the animals on it had to be rescued off of it during a storm. It hit a bunch of other ships in the harbor, and so it made the news that Noah's Ark animals had to be rescued. Now, I don't know if you guys been to this site in the U.S. This is the Ark Encounter in Kentucky, and I was there this last year. This one's about the same size as Noah's Ark. It's a little over 500 feet long, and inside they have displays, and it's the largest wooden object on Earth right now, they say. And they kind of show what it would be like with the lighting and the 3 decks, and it's a massive object. Now, in Asia, not to be outdone, a couple billionaire Christian brothers built this hotel that's the size of Noah's Ark and the shape. So it has a 4-star restaurant inside, and you can enjoy some luxurious rooms. So I don't think Noah had it this easy, but you could, if you just want to act like you're in a flood, you can go there. In 2014, an archaeologist with the British Museum published an article where he believed he had reinterpreted this cuneiform tablet from Iraq, and he claimed that the ark, based on the inscription on that tablet, was a round-shaped boat, and so like a floating saucer. Now, I think they would get dizzy in there, but you can see the world has strange ideas out there about the ark. But this was a really good article. It was published in a peer-reviewed journal, and in this one, which I believe it's the Journal of Physics in 2013, these students were studying if the ark could float based on the dimensions given in the Bible, and they said they were quite surprised that it would. Now, as believers, we know that is true, but they were surprised. And so they had calculated that 2 million sheep could fit on if all the animals were the size of sheep. Now, in the Bible account, we're not going to go through all the little details, because we're going to get into what has been happening the last couple of years at this site we're investigating. But in the Bible, in Genesis chapter 8, verse 4, it gives a very brief description of where the ark landed. And that's kind of why there's a mystery of what happened to the ark. It just says it landed upon the mountains, notice it's plural, the mountains of Ararat. And so, based on archaeology, they know that this country, or this land of Ararat, is based in the eastern part of the country of Turkey. And so when you go there, they have found archaeological sites associated with the country of Turkey, and even into the nearby countries of Armenia and northern Iran. And so I went there in 2017, my first time to Armenia. This was the fall of 17, and it was an amazing trip, just seeing the culture and meeting friendly locals. Now, Armenia was actually the first country to become a Christian nation back in the 300s AD. And so it has a famous monastery where you can look at Mount Ararat and get some really good views from their side of the border. Now, we're working in eastern Turkey, but that used to be the country of Armenia back before the Ottoman Empire was broken up a little over 100 years ago. But in this country of Armenia, you find some really interesting archaeological sites. And again, we're just right across the border from this boat-shaped formation. They found this cave, and in the back of this cave, they found one of the oldest wineries. So it kind of brings to mind that story about Noah having a vineyard and getting drunk. In the same archaeological site, they found the oldest shoe. And so it's quite interesting. Now, I don't know if I used this photo last time, but do you guys know what this is? You can yell out an answer. I think it's okay to speak up. Any idea? A rock. It's petrified, so it is. It's actually a petrified brain. And they found it in a skull of a little girl. And so flattened. But yeah, that was quite odd, so I thought I'd throw that in. That was actually found in the same area too as the winery. Now, in the country of Armenia, they found this really interesting metallurgical site where they produce different types of metals. And the product from these foundries, they found out it was shipped all over Europe back in the Bronze Age and earlier. And they had quite advanced metallurgical production going on. We got there the very last day of one of their digs for that season, and the Armenian archaeologists told us they've actually found steel at the site. So that was interesting. They're working with the Polish team to excavate more, and here they're excavating a grave site. Now, a lot of Christians, since let's say the 1900s, the modern search for Noah's Ark has focused on the tallest mountain in Turkey, because it's the tallest mountain. So you're assuming after the flood, the ark would have landed there. The problem with this is that the tradition of the ark landing on this mountain only goes back to 425 AD, so it doesn't go all the way back. And the biggest issue, though, is that it's a stratovolcano, it's a compound volcano, and so these types of mountains are built up by multiple eruptions. And so here's a little graphic that kind of shows what a compound or composite or stratovolcano looks like. And so if the ark even landed on something like this, any eruption after the flood would have destroyed it, if the mountain was even around during the time of the flood. And so here's some photographs of just famous volcanoes. This is Mount Taranaki in New Zealand. Here's a famous one nearby. You can see Mount Rainier on the top right, then Mount Fuji. And then here are some photographs of Mount Ararat. Again, it's a stratovolcano. It has one of the biggest bases in the world for a mountain. You can see how small we are at the bottom of the photograph. And you can see the lava flows in this one. It's about 17,000 feet in elevation. Here are a couple of NASA photographs. I'm just pointing out the massive lava flows with the red arrows. Now, some people have thought that the ark landed on the northern face in this area called the Ahora Gorge. And here's an arrow pointing it out. It's the north face of the mountain. Now, the problem with that is that this gorge was formed by an 1840 eruption. And it was a massive eruption, just like Mount St. Helens, that blew out the side of the mountain. And the strange thing is, some people have claimed that they've found a perfectly preserved barge boat up in that same area, high up on the gorge. And so there's no evidence that's there. Others have used old CIA photographs and found shapes of ships up on the top, and they've gone to investigate and made films. Nothing has been found. Others have claimed they've touched it. This is a Frenchman back in the 1950s. He said he went up there and found wood, and others have written similar books. And then in 2010, a Chinese group claimed that they had found the boat, and they had all these photographs and specimens and, garbanzo beans and rice and, there's all sorts of things they found inside the ship. But we happened to talk to the locals, and they basically said a couple years before they brought the Chinese there, they planted all this up high on the mountain. And then in the winter, the snow froze it all in place, and then they charged the Chinese about $30,000 a person to go see this. And I talked to an Adventist guy who was actually on one of the expeditions, and he told me that's how I know the price. He says $30,000 to go up. So you can see there's some money involved. And I think this book by the wife of Colonel Jim Irwin, he walked on the moon. He was a creationist, and he was interested during his lifetime in searching for Noah's Ark. And she wrote a book about the search on Ararat. And the title of her book was The Unsolved Mystery. And that's basically the case for any attempt to look on that volcanic mountain. There's nothing up there. Now, in ancient sources, I'm going to go through these really quick, but in ancient times, they did talk about a general area that back then the ancient tourists would go. Here's a quote from the Jewish historian, Titus Flavius Josephus, and he talks about this place in Armenia. Now, in 1959, it hit the news that a boat-shaped object had been found by aerial photographs, and this site was about 15 miles south of the big mountain, and this is the site we're focusing on today. And you can see I'm pointing it out there in this aerial photo. And so here are the original photographs from 1959 that was published in multiple news magazines and newspapers. We met this individual. His name is Ara Guler, and he passed away last year. He was 90 years old, quite a character. But he was the first man on the site. After they published these NATO photographs of the boat, he was a private citizen. He hired a plane, and he went out and relocated the boat-shaped object. Now, we met him in 2016, and he was quite fascinating talking to him. And these are photographs that he took from the plane. Now, he's a world-famous photographer, and so he's world-renowned for his photos of life in Turkey. And anyways, he took these photographs of the object that caught the world's attention. In 1960, the Turkish Hayat magazine, which is like Life magazine, and Life magazine, those two magazines published an article about an American expedition that went there. And these Americans, they included a couple Adventist evangelists, an Adventist archaeologist, a journalist, and then the Captain Durupinar. He's the Turkish guy who found the photograph with the ark. They went there and found it in June of 1960. They were able to relocate the site. Now, they ended up using dynamite to try to excavate. And I don't know what the archaeologist on that team thought of that, but that's definitely not how you do archaeology. And they came away disappointed, but one of the guys in the group thought they came to a hasty conclusion on it, and that he believed it was basically a ship object, that there's nothing in nature that could produce that. Now, the Turks became interested in this site mainly in the 1980s, and so they have built a road up there, and they're recently paving this road. In fact, I think it's finished already. And they even built a visitor center, and they about 2 years ago renovated it. And you can see inside it's really nice, wood paneling. And so they're putting their money into this site for tourists. Now, why do we think this is the Ark site? What did the Turks see? We're going to look at some of the evidence from the 1980s, the teams that worked on it, including Ron Wyatt and David Fazold. And then we're going to look at what we did in 2014. And I'm going to let you guys know about the excavation attempts we're trying to do this year and how you could join in. And so we'll go through this really quick. So the first thing that caught everyone's attention, like that quote, it was the shape of the object. Now, if this was a natural object, the ship shape is the opposite. So the rounded end is downhill. So if this was formed by mud flow going around a rock, then the pointed end would be downhill. And so this is the complete opposite of this site. Again, that quote by Dr. Arthur Brandenburger. And at the time, he was famous because he helped with the Cuban Missile Crisis to identify the Russian missile sites in Cuba. And so he was actually involved in this Noah's Ark project back then. Now, the size of the object, the Bible gives very brief dimensions. It doesn't explain whether this is the outside or the inside dimensions, but it says 300 cubits long, 50 wide, and 30 high. Now, there are multiple cubits, which is a form of measurement in the ancient world, but during the time of Moses, who wrote the book of Genesis, the main cubit was the Egyptian royal cubit. It's kind of like the metric system today is used around the world. And so here we have a quote from the Encyclopedia Britannica mentioning that the cubit was about 20.62 inches. And so if you do the math, you'll come out to be, for the site to be about 515 feet long for the length of it. And that's exactly what you find in this site. We've done multiple measurements. Others have done it too with lasers and survey equipment, and it's 515 feet long. Now, all these years, the Turks have never let anyone excavate it. So everyone has had to have done geophysical surveys, things with metal detectors and other subsurface radar equipment. And just using metal detectors in the 1980s, they mapped out a pattern of metal just inside of this boat formation. So again, if it was a natural object, we have to explain away how does this pattern of metal occur just inside the boat. And we know from the biblical account, they did have metal before the flood. Even though evolutionary time frames say back then they were, this time frame would have been Stone Age or something, or they were just monkeys. So I don't think monkeys built the ark. Now, one of the things they found in, this was the June 1991 trip to the site, was right at the top end of it. They found this fossilized, what turned out to be a fossilized rivet. And here's the photograph from that trip. And then here's another one just right after they had found it. Then here's some photographs we recently took. And again, they had this tested, and it turned out to be a specialized alloy. In July 91, it was analyzed in Tennessee, and it was made up of aluminum, iron, and titanium. So, it wasn't just some Stone Age tool or object. They had it tested again in February 1992, and they found out that where the two arrows are at, those are two completely different objects. So where it looks like a fossilized or petrified metal, the ring of a washer, that had more iron than where the arrow in the back is, and it also had more. The arrow in the back had more organic carbon, so suggesting that was fossilized wood in the back, and this was metal in the front. Now, there are more of those around. If they're exposed to the elements, they oxidize and basically they're just there as rust. And so we found this, I found this one on the June 97 trip. And you can see they're just stains in the rock or the petrified wood. And a friend of mine had this analyzed in 2001, and these pieces here had the same type of material as the rivet. And so it's very similar. Now, we had X-ray diffraction done on it, which shoots X-ray, a small X-ray beam at the object. Within seconds, tells you what the object is made of. And what they found out is the front of it has 2 times as much iron as the back. And you can see in that graph, a screenshot at the lab there, that iron spike there on the left is way up there. So besides using metal detectors, the government of Turkey let people do subsurface radar. Now, this shoots basically thousands of times a second radar into the ground, and then the software maps out the radar bouncing back. So it kind of gives you an idea of what's below ground, so you don't have to excavate. Now, based on this data, they were able to, for example, pinpoint a pattern that's not natural going across the ship, suggesting walls and rooms. And this is like looking through like a slice of a cake or a slice of bread. You're looking down at the site of the object underground. Now, the manufacturer of this radar unit, when he saw the scan reports, he said, this is not a natural object. They're occurring too periodic. It's not just random. Now, the Turkish government asked Ron Wyatt in 1987 to demonstrate the radar. And so about 70 feet from the end of the boat, he did a scan for the government. The governor was there, the Turkish military, and he showed the military, the governor, that there was a scan that had something near the surface, about 2 feet below the ground. And so the governor told one of the Turkish soldiers to dig it up. Now, this would be the first time that the site has been, that someone has dug on the site legally, besides the dynamite in the 1960s. And so this is what they found when they dug it up. Visually it looks like a plank of wood. There's the back side of it. Now, they had it tested in 1987, and it showed that it had 0.7% organic carbon. So this was a piece of stone that would have no organic carbon at all in it. Now, it's quite heavy. It's 37 pounds for the size of it. And the reason why is because it has 13% iron. And so part of the petrification process, the metals around the wood replace the wood molecules, and so all this metal, like the iron, leached in. So it's quite a heavy object. They then did thin sectioning on this deck timber, and they found that it's actually layers of wood. So it's not just one solid piece of wood, but layers of wood that looks like it was glued together. Now, in October 23rd in 1990, they did a mini excavation. The Turkish government allowed them to shave off part of the dirt on the sides of this boat. And what was revealed was quite amazing. Here you can see what looks to be rib timbers going up and down on the side. And again, this was on the uphill south side of the boat. And there it is again. Now, about a mile uphill from this boat-shaped object is the Iranian border. So we're really close to Iran, and that's why it's really hard to do work there because of the military zone we're in. But they were able to go up there in the mid-'80s, and again, this is about a mile above the boat. You're going up the mud flow, so if the boat came down, it would have been higher up. And you can see this little video clip from, I think this was 85 or 86. They found some inscriptions up there. Right along the border. And so we're going to zoom into these inscriptions or petroglyphs. And the first thing you notice is that now they broke it up. When Ron, who originally found this, had saw it the first time, it was a complete inscription, not broken up. And so it was then put together into multiple border markers. The Turkish military had reused the stone, and so now it's like a jigsaw puzzle. But what he saw originally, and then the pieces you see in some of these photographs today, he was able to put together this drawing showing what he saw up there. And again, you can see in that red highlighted area that it was a boat-shaped formation, and it had 8 faces. Remember the story of the flood, had 8 people on the ark. And it has 2 birds, and then it shows a mountain and this like ridge or cliff on the left side. And if you notice, that boat formation in the drawing, in the petroglyph, is the same shape basically as what we saw in the NATO photographs in 1959. So whoever drew these back in ancient times were looking probably at the same object. And then again, look at that ridge that the red arrow is pointing out, and then that's the ridge you see today, right above the ark site. And then there it is. The bottom arrow shows the boat-shaped formation in the mud flow, and then the left arrow shows that ridge. Now, we went up there in May of 2014 trying to get permission to redocument that inscription. We met with a Turkish military official up there, and he basically said it's a no man's zone area right now, and he told us to leave. He was firm, but he was nice. We got a photograph with him. So we're actually still working on getting permission to go up there to document that. Now, within a mile of the boat-shaped formation, at the same elevation basically, is this large fossil site. And again, this shows that this area was once underwater. We're talking about 6,000 plus feet elevation. And you find these seashells, sand dollars, and just regular seashells embedded and scattered throughout the sandstone. And so here's a perfectly preserved. In fact, it looks like one you'd pick up on the beach. It's not even fossilized yet. So I'm not sure how evolutionists deal with that. But you can see some of the sand dollars we found there. And I had one of my goals when I've been to the site multiple times, but I've never able to get a whole sand dollar. They're like cemented into the rock. So I said a little prayer, and this was May of this last year, And I asked God to help me find a sand dollar. I'm going to get one. And I had brought a geology hammer, and I was trying to hammer away and break a piece off. It wasn't working. And within 5 minutes, I found 3 of them. Here's a photograph of 2 of them. And so I'm just thankful God heard my little prayer. And so I have pieces of some of the other ones here. I can show you guys later of these sand dollars. These whole ones, sadly, they're all given away, so I don't have them anymore. But here's a fossilized snail that we found actually on the ARC site, just laying around. Now here we get to the new stuff that's been happening the last couple of years. 2014, as I mentioned earlier, we had an expedition to eastern Turkey, and on this trip we were filming the resistivity scans that a friend from New Zealand was doing. And here we're meeting the governor. Sadly, we had to cut the trip short that year because of the Kurds protesting what was going on in Syria, and the Turkish government, they didn't think we were helping the Kurds enough, so they started protesting, and sadly 2 kids were killed one night. We were told to stay in our hotel, but before this protest happened, we were there 10 days, and we were able to scan 13 lines across the boat. And so we got enough data to present and to interpret these. So what is resistivity scanning? Now they use resistivity and radar at archaeological sites. So here's a site in the UK that's a Middle Ages site with a moat and a castle in the middle. And just using radar and resistivity, they were able to recreate the whole town without digging it up. And so resistivity uses electrical current. They shoot it through the ground, and based on how resistive the object is below ground, whether it's a pocket of air, which it would stop the electricity, or water, it will go right through it, the software can interpret and map out and show you the shape of what's below ground. And so that's a general idea of how it works. I am not an engineer, so if you have any specific questions about this, I was there doing the video work, and so it was my friend here. I first met him in 2005 in Jerusalem. We were on a dig in Israel, and he used the same equipment over there for an archaeological dig. And so here he is doing his survey work for the dig, for the scans. And so based on these scans, we're going to show you some of the results of what was below ground. And a couple of the posters in the lobby show some of this, but we have some new ones I have in the presentation tonight. And every night he would come back to the hotel and present the results after he had run it through his laptop, some of the basic modeling of the results. And so it was pretty exciting for those 10 days that we were there. Now here's a little video. There's no audio, I believe, on this one. And so this kind of shows you what it's like to do a resistivity scan. This was October of 2014, so everything's brown now. And if you look closely, you can see the actual people walking down there. It's a massive site, 515 feet long. There's John. He's the friend from New Zealand who had the permit to do this work. So they have these cables, and the cable, the longest, is over 515 feet long. And they connect the cables to steel, or I think they're steel pins. And you have to pound those into the ground, and then those cables are connected to electrical source, like a car battery, and then that powers the whole system. And then all that data is collected at a central unit. So every time they would do a scan, they had to move it. So they did 13 of these. So it was quite tedious work. And you're at about 6,500 foot elevation doing this. And they had to deal with the weather. So this is fall time, so they had a lot of storms coming through. And since you're dealing with electricity, you don't want to be out there with this equipment. It would ruin the results, for one thing. So you can see all the pins and the cabling they had to connect. Now, we had to deal with sabotage during this trip and death threats. Because our work at this site is in counter to what's being proposed by some of these other people on Mount Ararat, some of those guides who make $30,000 a head, they actually called in anonymous threats to our team, and one night they pulled up all our stakes. And so John had to resurvey some of that. And so it was quite an interesting trip. Now the results, what is below the ground? And so we're going to look at this. Here's the idea of what we did. We did 10 scans lengthwise and 3 across. Now here's the object again. I'm going to highlight it. So this is the boat-shaped formation. Now the first scan we're going to look at shows an interesting layer right below the ground within 3 feet that covers most of the site. So the red arrows here show this solid piece of layer I'm not going to call it, you can call it a deck layer. Interesting that we find 3 of these, but I'm not going to say that. But basically, excavations would show what it is. We're going to zoom into the downhill end of the boat, and here are the scans right there. And this is not a perfectly preserved object. It's buried in the mud. It's 4,000 years old, but we're seeing a solid layer through there. And then if you go to the uphill end, you see the same thing, this solid layer about 3 to 6 feet below the ground. Now, one of the cross scans, here's the boat again. We find these layers again going across. Notice there's a bottom area to it, and then on this next one, it points out in closer view the red, this 3 to 6 feet below ground layer with the red arrows pointing out, and then in between is full of mud. What's interesting on this one, it actually shows a pattern going across what looks to be mud-filled rooms. These are almost square-shaped areas that are really resistive, or different resistivity than the deck layer, the thick layer below it. Now, we were even seeing the hull of the ship, the shape of this. Now, if this was a natural object, this would just be a random thing of rocks and dirt. You wouldn't find the layers like this just inside the boat-shaped formation, and you wouldn't find a hull. So we're seeing on each end of the boat, the pointed end going, I'll go back to this slide, you can see this pointed end going up and curving up like a boat hull would do. Now, if we go back to what the Bible account says in regards to the height of the boat, we know that the Bible says there's 30 cubits, or about 51 feet high. Now, what's interesting, there's some areas of this boat where you actually see 3 layers. And if you were to add the internal dimensions of these up, it actually comes out to be 30 cubits. And so we're finding that the boat is actually below ground more preserved than we thought. It's not all collapsed down like they thought in the 1980s. That there are actually areas where you have these decks or these layers that are perfectly preserved. Now, what about the width of it? We talked about the length being exactly 515 feet and matching the Bible, and then the height inside is 30 cubits. Well, the width is very similar. So, and the widest part, though, is it is wider than the biblical account. It's 138 feet. The Bible says the ark should be about, if you go back to that, it says about 85.7 feet. So how do we deal with this extra width in the middle? Again, the scans are showing something interesting. It is showing that the wide part of the boat was broken away. This is the left side of the screen that has some text up there. And if you were to put that piece back into place that fit the rest of the ark, then the internal dimensions of the boat matches the 26 meters or 30 cubits, or 50 cubits, whatever 50 cubits. And so, again, we're showing that this is an old object, that it has decayed and splayed out. Now, some other interesting things we're seeing are internal walls or rib timbers. Again, you can see this pattern of horizontal members going up and down in the radar scans. So this kind of reminds us of that mini excavation they did in 1990, where you had these rib timbers going up and down. And then on the western side, where the red arrows pointed out, we had this one scan that showed really spectacular results just right below the surface, and we hope to excavate this site. And so it's about a 20 or 30-foot drop right there. And so the cable, where the red arrows are, those are where they punched in with the steel pins. So it's about, I think those are 3 meters apart, about 9 feet. And so the results for that one scan right there shows that right below the surface is a solid member. In fact, the guy who was on this trip, and he was one pounding in the steel pins, he said they hit within 2 inches below the soil a solid, we can call it rock or petrified wood, but it was 20 feet up and down and 2 feet wide. They could not pound the steel pins in. In fact, they bent the pin doing that. And so they were wondering, what is this? Well, now the scans, when they processed it, the scan shows this up and down timber. So the idea, this is a reconstruction here, that this is the ribs of a ship that's right below the surface, that's still preserved in that area, and so this is what we hope to excavate, this area right here. Now, John, our friend from New Zealand, was able to do some 3D processing right after the trip, and the initial results we're showing again, and I highlighted in red, but we're showing again that this has a hull shape. This is the boat-shaped formation underground. And now you can go to a website and learn more about some of this stuff. This is his site from New Zealand, noahsarkscans.nz. or as they say, NZ. And so our excavation plans, I'm going to present this to you because I hope some of you can go with us this summer. We'll know more by April, but we're going to have a sign-up sheet in the lobby in the afternoon meeting. Right now we don't have one, but if you could just, or you can just talk to me personally and get your name and email or phone number. But just to give you an example, these are boats, boat remains. So this is the Sea of Galilee boat. You can see how it has decayed. This is a 2,000-year-old boat during the time of Christ. And then here's a famous boat called the Sutton Hoo boat. It's a Viking burial ship that they excavated in the early 1900s in the UK. Now this one had rivets, so all the wood had decayed away, but left the rivets in place. This is the Viking ship. And so, these are the similar type of rivets we're finding on the Ark site. And we went through this already, and I thought I skipped all that. So anyways, this is the part right here where we want to excavate. That yellow line is where they draped the scan, the resistivity cables down, and then that red square is kind of our plan for excavation. And that's that area right there. And we have 3 different spots where we want to test what's below the ground off the ship. Now, the spring of this year, so this last year, we went back multiple times to the ship, trying to finalize our permits. We submitted this whole scan to the Turkish government back in 2015. They were impressed enough that by the summer of 2015, they gave us permission to dig. And so a small group of us was going to go over. We were going to recruit like we're doing right now. But that summer, sadly, there was another Kurdish problem with the Turks, and they told us not to come over. There was political instability in the region. And so that was 2015. 2016, we tried again, and this was looking good. We opened it up. We had 20 to 30 volunteers signed up. We had all bought our tickets. And so 2 weeks before we were about to go on our trip in August 2016, so mid-July, there was a coup attempt in Turkey. And part of the military tried to take over the government. And so that was obviously a big issue, and that was in the news back then. And so we had to cancel, and we lost a ton of money. But so then, since that time, the country of Turkey has been under a state of emergency, which gives the president special powers, and he has arrested a lot of people and thrown others out of their jobs. And so the government told us, this is not the time for you guys to be doing a dig over here. And so even up to 2017, the next year, they were still under a state of emergency. And then finally, July of this last year, after the presidential election, he rescinded. President Erdogan won, and he said if he wins the election, he would rescind the state of emergency. And he won. His political party won parliament, and so they rescinded it. So in August of last year, I went back to try to get permits to see how our permit was doing. But the spring, I was over there, and one of the first things we found on that spring trip, which was something new, was we found an additional drogue stone. Now, because of time, I didn't go over some of the other evidence for this boat-shaped formation, but nearby this site, there are these massive 10-foot tall stones with holes in them, and they believe they were stabilizing stones hung off the boat, so they call them drogue stones, not anchor stones. But we found a new one that was just recently uncovered by the villagers. And by chance, I don't believe in chance, but by divine appointment, we ran into a Turkish reporter at the site. She was doing a big article in Turkish about the search for Noah's Ark, and so she wanted to know why we were there, and so we told her about our research and the scans in 2014. And so she and her media team, she had a drone team with her, they interviewed us, and then they let us fly our own drone under their permit. And so again, this is a military zone, so you're not legally allowed to fly a drone there unless you have permission. And so here's just some new aerial imagery that we see from the drones last year. So it gives us a better view than the NATO photograph from 1960. You can see the ship object. Now, obviously, when you're flying a drone, even in the U.S., people are interested. So these kids came by to ask for money and watch me fly the drone. They had 3 big sheepdogs. So Christina would know about sheepdogs. They were vicious. I told the kids to keep the dogs away. And one of the dogs tried to grab the drone midair, like jump up. So I was out, and my battery was low on the drone. I was trying to land it. So I was like, get the dog away. And they don't speak English, so I had to use hand signals. So here's the article. You can look it up if you want the URL, and you can translate it on Google Translate, but it's in Turkish, and where she interviews our team about our expedition. And about 3 weeks later, after that interview, a Canadian team showed up, and two of them are the young couple with the green jacket, and then the guy on the left, the married couple. They're from Toronto area, Canada. They're scientists. She has her degree in heritage preservation, so they preserve archaeological sites, and he's has his PhD, or he's getting his PhD in chemistry. And so they were interested in Noah's Ark. They're Bible believers, and so they came out there, and we did a new survey of the boat. We hired a Turkish team to do a land survey. Here's our total station unit, and then we flew the drone, and we used photogrammetry, which is software that takes all these photographs and makes a 3D object. And so we were able to do this in May of last year. And on that same trip, right after the rainstorm, we were able to have this little object tested. Now, what's really interesting, this thing's pretty heavy. And I have this with me if you want to take a look at it later. And it caught my eye because it was super red. When I touched it, it was bleeding like iron was oxidizing. But it's a small object, but it was heavy. And so in the 1980s, Ron Wyatt had found larger specimens of this type of object, and they had it tested, and turns out to be slag from metallurgical production. So that's the byproduct when you're making iron or other metals. That's the stuff that's left over. And so he believed that this stuff, because it's heavy, that Noah put it in the bottom of the boat as ballast to keep the ship upright. So so this stuff is coming out at the end of the boat. And so we found this little sample, and we had it tested. And the guy who tested it told me that based on just the chemistry alone and nothing else, that it most possibly is slag. And this is his report. And if you want to read it, I can show the full report to you later. Now here's where, this is why I titled the message Miracles in Turkey. So when I went there in September, we're trying to get this dig going. And so we're working on finalizing the permits that they promised us back in 2015. And so this is one of my favorite verses besides the one that was read for the scripture today. And it's about how God orders your steps and how he knows, he has plans for you, and he knows what needs to be done while you may not know at that time. And so we had all these plans. We were going to go to these universities, try to meet with Turkish archaeologists, because we have to work with a counterpart. We can't just go over there and dig. We're not archaeologists. Out of the blue, this was end of September. I'm over there in eastern Turkey. This individual called us. Now, we hadn't seen this guide since 2000, but out of the blue, he calls our guide. His name is Dr. Salih Baraktutan. He's a geologist and retired now. But he said there's a cultural festival coming up at the end for one weekend at the end of September. And he said they're going to have all these booths. Scientists will be coming in, and they're going to talk about Noah's Ark and tourism for the province. And so that gave us an opportunity. We didn't know this was coming up. This was just something out of the blue that just popped up. And here's an advertisement in the town that showed up about it. And so we made a presentation in Turkish, Nuhum Gemisi, which means Noah's boat in Turkish. And we made a Turkish flip chart to show these scientists, what the work we're trying to do there. And we got a booth set up. We had books in English and Turkish about Noah's Ark. Again, it says, Nuhum Gemisi, Noah's Ark. We had coral and other fossilized seashells as specimens to show the crowds. And we had a TV monitor. So we ended up being the most popular booth during that festival. And now I had to go to Saudi Arabia for the weekend. So these are photographs by my guide over there. I was given somebody, the guy who tested that little sample, he was in Saudi Arabia at the time, and he wanted to see Mount Sinai, the topic we're talking about this afternoon. And so I had to fly to Saudi for the weekend, show him around, and then fly back. Meanwhile, my friend is there working this booth, and amazing things were going on. So besides about 2,000 to 3,000 people going through our booth, and here you can just see the locals looking at the flip chart and the specimen. But we ended up meeting somebody we wanted to meet all this time. Now, I've blacked out this person's photograph, but this individual is a Turkish archaeologist working under the government in this region. And she was watching from a distance, watching our booth, and saw what we were doing, and she did some investigation, realized that we have a permit, and that we're doing everything legally. And now she came up to our guide there, Zafir, who's actually a Christian. He's the only Christian in town. And she told him that she had this interest in Noah's Ark all these years, and that she was interested in this site, but she had no one to work with. And she found out about our efforts and wanted to be the lead archaeologist. And so here, because of this festival we knew nothing about, God had brought an archaeologist who was interested in the topic to us instead of us going searching for somebody. And so that was a big miracle right there. And I finally got to meet her when I came back from Saudi Arabia. Now, she asked that her photograph not be shown yet, only because, we're trying to get the permits finalized, and on top of it, they're just very paranoid over there with all the arrests going on, since the coup attempt. And so everyone obviously wants to keep their job, so she doesn't want to be shown. But she's working at an archaeological site right nearby, and her name's on this big billboard. So I blocked out her name, but it says archeolog, which is Turkish for archaeologist. So besides her showing up, a whole bunch of politicians came through, the local governor for the province, and then all these vice governors, and they got to see what we're trying to do with tourism in the site. And so here's the new governor. He was just he just replaced another guy. They rotate the governors every 2 years. And so here's our guide showing the guy with the suit, the new governor, my flip chart going through, explaining to him about Noah's Ark. And because of the popularity of the booth and our presentation there, the government gave us the Best of the Booth award for the whole festival. And so the media was there, and they ended up giving us this special plate congratulating us on this. Now, about the same time, and then these are the new scans I was telling you about that just came through. About the same time, this was early October, John in New Zealand emailed us and said, hey, the company that makes the resistivity hardware, they updated their software that they can now do 3D a lot better than before. So he ran all the same data through the new software, and now we were able to see the complete hull of the ship below ground. So all this blue is stuff below ground. This is not above ground. And so we printed this out immediately and went to the Turkish officials we were trying to get a hold of, and we showed them these results. We had a report to give them, and they were super excited when they saw this. Looks like a whale right there. Now, one of the things we were trying to do, so that governor, the new governor, he met Zafir at our booth, but we needed to have a sit-down meeting with him, and he was super busy. So we ended up creating some gifts to give them. These are drone photographs we had printed and framed, and we told his staff that we need to meet with this guy, explain to him our plans for excavation, and they kept on putting it off. They wouldn't let us meet the guy. Well, one Sabbath afternoon, it was a Saturday afternoon there, we decided to go back to the Ark site just to enjoy some time up there. And I'm about to fly my drone over the Ark site, and I look across at the road that goes up, and I see all these fast-moving SUVs with tinted windows. So I knew there was some type of security operation going on. So I land the drone, and guess who shows up? It's the new governor. He happens to be at the same site. Now the military here, this is the Turkish military, they gave him a tour of the Ark site and explained to him what, on site, what the whole thing was about. And so here's a little video clip I took with my iPhone of the surprise visit. Now, I guess I was not supposed to do this because the security official saw this and he immediately came over and told me to stop and put my phone away. And so our guide Zafir told the governor, since he was there, hey, we've been denied seeing you. We really want to see you and talk about our plans here. He said, come to my office Monday. We'll put you on the schedule. This was a Saturday. So the following Monday, we go to his office, and we find out that we've been taken off the list. Someone deleted our name. And so we don't know, well, what's going on? Why do they keep doing this to us? So that evening, we're talking to one of Zafir's friends, who's the president of the local ACT party. It's like the Republican Party or Democratic Party. He's the local chapter president for this region. And he finds out what's going on. He said, I'll make one phone call. I'll get you back on the list. And sure enough, by Friday, we're able to see the governor. Now, what we find out is that the governor's secretary, who's also his private security guard, he was the one who deleted us off the list. He said, you guys are nobodies. This guy, the new governor's too busy to see you. Why are you here? And so, but because our friend who's the local president has special connections, he got our names back on the list, and we were able to see the governor and talk to him about our excavations, our plans for it. And here we gave him one of our drone photographs, and really nice guy. Now, this was a Friday afternoon, so the next morning, so basically what he told us was, he said, I'm a new guy here. You guys want to do a dig, but I don't know what it takes to do a dig. I don't want to step on someone's toes in another department. He said, go talk to the culture and tourism ministry officials. It's a totally different department. So we were a little bummed out. He was supportive of our efforts, but he said, go talk to someone else. And so that next day, this was Friday, so we're thinking, this was then Saturday morning, Sabbath morning, we're thinking, what are we going to do? We get a phone call from that same ACT party president, and he tells us, well, guess what? Tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, the Minister of Culture and Tourism, so that's a cabinet level position from the capital of Ankara, is coming on a surprise trip to the region, to this town. And so this guy, he's in charge of all the culture minister officials. He's showing up, and here's a news article photograph. He's the tall guy in the middle. He is a millionaire. He owns hotels and resorts across Turkey, and he's the first non-politician to be appointed to this position. He's a businessman. And so we find out from the locals his schedule for Sunday. Because again, we're not invited to this official event. But we find out that they're going to eat breakfast 1 block away from where my friend lives. I'm staying at his house, and he calls me from town. He said, "Get ready in 30 minutes. These officials are going to have a breakfast at this restaurant, which is like a block from his house." So all these top officials are coming. We get one of those drone photographs ready, printed up, and we had it all framed already. And so we head over. We get dressed and head over to this place where they're going to have this is a restaurant where they're going to have the breakfast. And as soon as we go down the street, we see security vehicles everywhere. There's military, Secret Service, police. All the locals are being stopped. No one can go close to this restaurant. Well, we walked right past all the officials, all the security guards, and we're carrying this big bag with they didn't even ask to look inside the bag. We kept walking past army soldiers, guys with, who knows what type of weaponry. And we get to the restaurant, and we get inside the place. And we walked right past everyone, and inside I happened to meet this individual. He's the culture and tourism official for the province. He's second in command, but for the whole region, he's involved with the Noah's Ark effort. And he even wrote a book recently in Turkish. There it is, the cover of it, called Nuhum Gemisi, or Noah's Ark. And they told us that they would like to publish an English edition with all our updated information from our scans. And so this guy, he told us again, he said, all these years, I've never known that there were other teams working on this site, and you guys are the first people I've heard about this. And so he's super excited to meet us. And he, to promote his book, he did some TV interviews there. I don't know if this actually plays. There it goes. So he's, again, right behind him is the boat-shaped object, and he's talking on Turkish television about his book about Noah's Ark. Now, the awesome thing about his book is that the Turkish government, they're buying. So he's making some good money besides his government salary. He sells his book to the government, and they're buying these books and giving it away for free. And so these books we were giving away at our booth. We had stacks of them, and I have a copy with me here if someone reads Turkish and want to see it. So anyways, this is the restaurant. We get inside. It's empty at this time. The officials had not shown up. Finally, they show up, and everyone's kicked out. Even the security guards are all told to leave the restaurant. Reporters are told to leave. Everyone's told to leave, except for my friend and I, our guide. They told us you can have a seat at a table, and this is from my table, looking at the politicians' table, and they even feed us the same food that they gave the politicians. So God was merciful. His grace that day, He was opening the doors for us to be a part of this event and get these connections going that we needed for this excavation. Now here he is right after they had ate breakfast there. He's having photographs with the owner of the restaurant. And then on top of that, they had another event at this Ottoman palace. So the Ottoman Empire, back in those days, they had these sultans, whatever you want to call them. And so one of their palace is a tourist site above the restaurant. And so they're going to have an event there. And we still, even though we ate breakfast with them, we had a little table, we had not talked to the head of tourism. He was 30 feet away, but we haven't actually spoken to him about our work. And so we head up to the top of the mountain there, where he is he's watching the cultural affairs, and there's some dancing going on. And so we get there, and there's a crowd of people. And his private security guard, I don't know if I could show you here, but anyways, his guard, who is right behind my friend Zafir, who's handing the photograph, the guy with the white shirt, anyways, he sees what we're trying to do. That we had this little bag, and he asked what's inside. We show him, and he said, well, follow me. I'll put you right in front of where he's going to be walking soon. And so he put us right in place where the Minister of Tourism walks right by. And now this photo, I look kind of funny because they asked for a photograph, and there's behind this picture is a ton of people. A lot of them are photographers. And his security guard just shoves me into the picture. And so I'm like a deer in the headlight look there, like, But anyways, they go, so we gave him the photograph, and we explained within 30 seconds about our efforts. It's a short little talk we gave him. And here you can see just the whole, like the local dancing going on. And so this is, part of the cultural event that he was there for. And then they went up higher up to this mosque where the local imam had died, hundreds of years ago. And so they prayed there. And on the way out of the mosque, I don't have a photograph of this, but on the way out of the mosque, he talks to me personally, and he does speak English. And I told him, again, within 1 or 2 minutes, our project about Nahum Gimesi and Noah's Ark. And that was that. So that was by Sunday afternoon. So Monday morning, we haven't heard anything yet about, what we're trying to do. The government hasn't said anything about going ahead and doing a dig last year. This was October. And so we go to the capital of Agri, which is the province capital, and we meet with that official who wrote the book, the Turkish official. And here he is. His name is Erkan. And so we give him, we're famous for giving out drone photographs. We give him another drone photograph. And he gives me a signed copy of his book. Here he's signing the book, and he gives that to us. And then he presents a plaque, a little plate, commemorative plate that has Noah's Ark on it. And this is the biggest thing that happened last year was that he told Zafir, our guide, he says, well, we had a meeting Sunday, which was yesterday, and we were talking about the tourism plans for the province, and we have officials appointed to talk about Mount Ararat tourism for trekking. We have people for all these sites, except we have no one appointed for Noah's Ark. Would you like to be the guy appointed? In the meeting, everyone said, who is the man who kept showing up at all the events with the photographs and talking about Noah's Ark? And so Zafir obviously agreed to take that position. And so this commission is going to be meeting. It hasn't met yet, but going to be meeting this winter and spring. And they're planning a 5-year plan for the whole area, including what to do with Noah's Ark. And so it's like God has put our man at this top position, which will be meeting at the capital of the country in Ankara, and he will be able to promote the excavations and everything. And so by the end of the trip, by the end of October, early November, it was getting cold. It was winter time there. Some snow had already fallen in the mountains, and they basically told us, look, you guys can't even, don't bring a team over here. Don't start a dig. It's going to be too cold and rainy and then snowy. Come back after the first of the year, we'll finalize the details, and you can start next summer. And so we plan to leave in a couple weeks from the Middle East, and in early April, we'll be in Turkey, finalizing everything. And so if you are interested, we will, by mid-April, have final details on dates and costs and everything if you want to help excavate this, what we believe is Noah's Ark. Now, the father of Turkish archaeology, Dr. Erkam Arkagal, who was he's passed away, but he was a famous archaeologist who found the Hittite Empire. He discovered the remains of the Hittites from the Bible. And he said when he saw the evidence back in the 80s, this was even before our scans, he said this is an ancient ship and it must be preserved. And we have that on video. And then Dr. Salih Baraktatam, the guy who gave us that phone call, kind of set the things in motion, he has said, and again, he believes that this is a boat, that it's not natural, and that all the evidence, and this was a quote from 2000, so this was again before our scans were done in 2014. And the end, I'd like to show a little video. This will hopefully whet your appetite if you're going to come with us. And now this does have audio. It just kind of gives you a flavor for Eastern Turkey. And this is stuff we shot last year with our drone and on the ground. think I'll end on this slide. One of our trips last year, I think this was April, we saw a double rainbow coming down from the ark site. So, actually, I have one more slide. It's a verse from Hebrews 11:7. Since we're here in church, I thought this would be appropriate actually to read. It says, "By faith Noah, being warned by God concerning events that as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith." I'll end with this slide, actually. One more slide. This is at 2:30 this afternoon, so in a couple hours. We can close with prayer or a song service. I'm not sure what's next. But
Andrew, I really believe the Lord is raising these evidences up at this time in history because Jesus is about to come. Amen? And as it says in 1 or 2 Peter 5, that in the last days scoffers will scoff,
yes.
following their own evil desires, saying, "Where's the sign of his coming?" Everything goes on and has since the beginning of creation. But they deliberately forget that God created the world with water, and by water he destroyed the world.
They deliberately forget.
They deliberately forget.
So they know it's true.
So God is raising up evidence that we might know and believe that indeed, as he destroyed the world once, he will come again and destroy it with fire. But the good news is he's coming. Do we want to be ready for him? That's my desire. Would you lead us in our closing hymn here?
Please stand with us as we'll sing number 537, "He Leadeth Me." He leadeth me, oh blessed thought, oh words with heavenly comfort wrought. Whate'er I do, where'er I be, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. He leadeth me, he leadeth me, by his own hand he leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me. He leadeth me onward this time, when by thy grace the victory's won. In death's cold wave I will not flee, since God through Jordan leadeth me. He leadeth me, he leadeth me, by his own hand he leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me.
Following Andrew's prayer, there will be a fellowship luncheon in our school cafeteria. And then back at 2:30, we'll be here to discover what?
We're going to look at Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia.
All right. Would you pray for us, Andrew?
Sure. Let us bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, just thank you that we could come together and look at these sites that you have preserved that show how accurate the Word of God is and how your Word is true even today. I just ask that this may be a blessing on those who heard it online and here locally, and that maybe we could share this with others who are looking for facts and data, and they are doubting the Bible. Maybe this can change their mind to how accurate your word is. I just ask that you bless the rest of our time together this afternoon. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.